The Whiskey Ring Scandal: How U.S. officials stole millions and went to prison. Before we begin, remember this story really happened in America. What you're about to hear shows how power can beat justice. If you want real, true crime stories that history tried to hide, subscribe now and stay with us until the end. The door slammed shut. Inside a cold federal courtroom in 1875, powerful men sat frozen in silence. These were not thieves from dark alleys. These were men in fine suits, men who shook hands with senators, men who signed government papers, men who smiled for newspapers. And now, they were accused of stealing millions from the United States government. One man wiped sweat from his face, another stared at the floor, a third clenched his jaw so tight it looked like his teeth might crack. Outside, crowds whispered a single question: how deep does this go? Because this was not just about whiskey. This was not just about money. This scandal had reached into the heart of the U.S. government itself. And before it ended, it would destroy careers, send men to prison, and nearly bring down a president's inner circle. But at this moment, no one yet knew how bad it truly was. That truth was still hidden in barrels of whiskey, fake tax stamps, secret letters, and coded messages passed in the dark. And the most shocking name of all had not yet been spoken out loud. Years earlier, after the Civil War, America was hurting. The government needed money badly. The war had cost lives, cities, and billions of dollars. To recover, the government placed heavy taxes on whiskey. Every gallon made had to be taxed. Every barrel counted. Every stamp mattered. On paper, it sounded simple. In real life, it created a perfect crime. Whiskey was everywhere. It was cheap to make and easy to hide. Distilleries popped up across the country, especially in cities like Chicago and Milwaukee. And where there is money, there are always people willing to bend the rules. At first, it was small. A distiller would underreport how much whiskey he made. A tax collector would look the other way. A quiet payment would change hands. No one got hurt. No one complained. Until it grew. Soon, the cheating was no longer small. It became organized, carefully planned, protected. Government tax agents, whose job was to stop fraud, became part of the fraud. Treasury officials joined in. Politicians were informed. Some even helped. This secret network became known as the Whiskey Ring, and it worked like a machine. Distillers paid bribes, tax collectors erased records, fake stamps were printed, whiskey barrels rolled out without full taxes paid. The government lost millions of dollars every year. Money meant for rebuilding the nation vanished, and no one dared speak, because the people involved were powerful. President Ulysses S. Grant sat in the White House, a hero of the Civil War. The public trusted him. Many believed he could do no wrong. But corruption was spreading under his watch. Grant himself did not drink. He hated corruption in public speeches. Yet many of the men closest to him were involved in dirty deals. That was the danger. The Whiskey Ring hid behind respect, behind uniforms, behind official seals. Anyone who tried to expose it risked losing their job, their reputation, or worse. Then, one man decided he had seen enough: Benjamin Bristow.
He was the Secretary of the Treasury. Quiet, serious, honest. He believed the government should protect the people, not rob them. When reports crossed his desk showing strange numbers, missing money, and tax collections that did not make sense, he began to dig. At first, others told him to stop. They said he was imagining things. They said the numbers were wrong. They said he was making enemies. Bristow did not stop. He sent secret agents undercover. He tracked money. He followed paper trails. He read letters that were never meant to be seen. What he found shocked him. The Whiskey Ring was not just stealing. It was mocking the law. Officials wrote letters joking about how easy it was to steal. They used code words. They spoke of friends who would protect them. One message chilled Bristow to the bone. It suggested that no matter what happened, someone very powerful would keep them safe. That someone was close to the president. By 1875, Bristow knew he had enough evidence. He moved fast. Federal raids hit distilleries without warning. Whiskey barrels were seized, documents were taken, tax stamps were exposed as fake. Suddenly, men who thought they were untouchable were being arrested. The public was stunned. Newspapers exploded with headlines. Citizens asked how such a massive theft could happen right under the government's nose. But the biggest shock was yet to come. One name appeared again and again in the investigation: Orville Babcock. He was President Grant's private secretary, one of the closest men to the president, a trusted insider. Letters showed Babcock had received coded messages from Whiskey Ring leaders, messages asking for protection, messages suggesting favors. When Grant was told, he refused to believe it. He stood by Babcock. Grant even agreed to testify for him. This moment split the nation. Some believed Grant was loyal. Others believed he was blind. Many feared the truth would never fully come out. Still, the trials moved forward. In crowded courtrooms, juries listened as prosecutors laid out the scheme. They showed how tax collectors took bribes. They showed how distillers cheated records. They showed how millions were stolen while ordinary Americans struggled. Witnesses talked about secret meetings and envelopes stuffed with cash, about threats to anyone who spoke. Some defendants broke down, others stayed calm, confident that powerful friends would save them. And for some, they were right. Many received light sentences, some avoided prison entirely, others were convicted but quickly pardoned. But not all escaped. Several men went to federal prison. Government officials who once wore badges now wore inmate numbers. Their fall was sudden and humiliating. Still, one question refused to go away. Why were the biggest names protected? Why did justice seem uneven? And how close did the Whiskey Ring come to the president himself? As the courtroom doors closed and prisoners were led away, the nation felt uneasy. If this could happen once, it could happen again. The Whiskey Ring showed America something dangerous, that corruption does not always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a suit. Sometimes it signs laws. Sometimes it sits close to power. And the most disturbing part was still ahead, because in the next chapter, one man would be put on trial whose conviction could shake the presidency itself. And President Grant would make a decision that changed American trust forever. If you think this scandal ended with prison bars, you're not ready for what comes next. The jury stood. The room went silent. Every eye turned toward one man sitting calmly at the defense table. His name alone made the courtroom tremble. Orville Babcock, the private secretary to President Ulysses S. Grant, a man who walked freely through the White House halls, a man who knew the president's secrets. If he fell, the presidency would be scarred forever. If he walked free, America would question whether justice even mattered. Outside the courthouse, crowds waited, holding their breath. Newspapers had already printed two versions of history, one where Babcock was guilty, one where he was saved by power.
Inside, the judge nodded. The verdict was about to be read. And no matter what the words said, the damage had already begun. Months earlier, when Babcock's name first appeared in the Whiskey Ring letters, Benjamin Bristow felt his stomach drop. This was not just another corrupt official. This was the president's right hand. Bristow knew what this meant. If he pushed forward, he would not just be fighting criminals, he would be fighting politics, loyalty, fear. But he also knew something else. If he backed down now, the Whiskey Ring would never truly die. So he pressed on.
Investigators gathered every letter connected to Babcock. They studied the handwriting, the codes, the timing. One letter stood out. It spoke of protection. It hinted that arrests should be slowed. It ended with words that sounded harmless, but meant everything. Let no guilty man escape. To prosecutors, it was a warning. To defenders, it was a misunderstanding. To the public, it sounded like corruption whispering through paper. President Grant was furious. He believed Bristow had gone too far. Grant was a loyal man. He stood by his friends even when it hurt him. He refused to believe Babcock was guilty. And then he did something no president had done before. He agreed to testify. Grant's decision shocked the nation. A sitting president would speak in defense of a man accused of stealing from the government. Supporters said it proved Grant's honesty. Critics said it proved his blindness. When Grant's sworn statement was read aloud, it carried enormous weight. He said Babcock was loyal, honest, trustworthy. He said he believed the letters were innocent. The courtroom felt heavy. How could 12 jurors stand against a war hero president? Prosecutors pressed on anyway. They showed how the whiskey ring operated like a spider web. They showed how bribes flowed upward, how protection flowed downward. Witnesses described secret meetings. Distillers admitted they paid to stay safe. Tax agents admitted they erased records. Some wept, some trembled, others lied. Several witnesses suddenly forgot details. Others changed stories. Fear hung in the air. People whispered that powerful hands were pulling strings behind the scenes. Then came the defense. Babcock's lawyers attacked the investigation. They called the letters unclear. They mocked the codes. They suggested Bristow was chasing fame. They reminded the jury that no money had been traced directly into Babcock's hands. No barrel, no stamp, no envelope of cash. Just words on paper. And the president's voice echoed in the room, even though he was not physically there. That voice mattered. After days of testimony, the jury was sent away. Now, in the present moment, they had returned. The foreman cleared his throat. Not guilty. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Babcock did not smile. He simply closed his eyes. Outside, the crowd erupted. Some cheered, others shouted in anger. The message was clear. Justice had limits. The acquittal crushed Benjamin Bristow. He had done everything right. He followed the law. He uncovered the truth. And still, power had won. Within weeks, Bristow was pushed out of office. The whiskey ring trial slowed. Energy drained from the prosecutions. Some cases were quietly dropped. Others ended in mild sentences. President Grant issued pardons. Men who had stolen millions walked free.
The public trust cracked. People began to ask dangerous questions. If rich officials were protected, what chance did ordinary people have? If prisons were for the weak, what did justice even mean? The whiskey ring may have been wounded, but it was not destroyed. Inside federal prisons, the few convicted men served time. They were not like other inmates. They had connections. They had money waiting outside. Their sentences were shorter. Their treatment was easier. Meanwhile, poor offenders served long, brutal terms for smaller crimes. The difference was impossible to ignore. Newspapers began using a new phrase, two systems of justice, one for the powerful, one for everyone else. The whiskey ring faded from headlines, but its lesson stayed. Corruption did not need guns or violence. It only needed silence and loyalty, and it could survive inside the law itself. Years later, historians would argue over Grant's role. Some said he was innocent but naive. Others said he protected his own. No proof ever placed him directly inside the whiskey ring, but the stain remained. The scandal damaged his legacy forever. As for America, the whiskey ring changed how people saw government. Trust was no longer automatic. Citizens became watchers, and prisons, once seen as equal punishments, were exposed as uneven tools. But one final truth had yet to surface, because deep in government records lay evidence never fully explored. Evidence that suggested the whiskey ring reached further than anyone admitted. And if that evidence ever came to light, it could rewrite history itself. In the next chapter, a forgotten confession threatens to reopen the case, and it asks a chilling question. What if the biggest criminals never went to prison at all? The confession was never meant to be found. It sat buried in old government files, written in shaky ink, ignored for years. No headlines, no trial, no prison cell attached to it. But if those words had been taken seriously, the whiskey ring scandal might have ended very differently, and some of the most powerful men in America might have joined the inmates they helped protect. Years after the trials ended, a former whiskey ring insider broke his silence. He was no hero. He had been part of the system. He had taken bribes. He had helped hide whiskey from tax collectors. He had watched money move like water. But age, fear, and guilt changed him. He knew the truth people were afraid to say. The whiskey ring was never just a group of greedy men. It was a system designed to protect itself. This man explained how officials used delays, lost paperwork, and friendly judges to weaken cases, how witnesses were pressured to forget details, how some evidence never made it to court at all. Most shocking of all, he described how certain names were never allowed to appear in indictments, not because there was no evidence, but because exposing them would damage the government itself. By the late 1870s, the whiskey ring had officially ended, but corruption did not vanish. It adapted. Some of the same men quietly returned to business. Others took different government roles. A few even rebuilt public reputations. The prisons held only a handful of offenders, and even then, not for long. Some served months instead of years. Some were released early. Some lived comfortably, while poor inmates suffered brutal conditions for far smaller crimes. This uneven justice became impossible to ignore. People began to understand something frightening. Prison was not just about crime, it was about power. Inside federal prisons, former whiskey ring members were careful. They kept quiet. They avoided attention. They knew survival meant blending in. But guards treated them differently. They were educated, well-spoken, connected. Some guards showed respect. Others showed fear. The inmates noticed. Whispers spread. Those are the whiskey men. Men who stole millions yet slept on clean beds. Men who broke national laws but ate better food than thieves and laborers. The lesson was clear. Not all crimes are punished equally. President Grant left office with his reputation damaged. He was still respected as a war hero, but trust had been lost. The whiskey ring followed his name forever. Grant insisted he was betrayed by others. Many believed him, but Americans were no longer satisfied with belief. They wanted proof, and proof was hard to find in a system built on silence. Benjamin Bristow faded from power, but remained respected by historians. He had tried to clean the rot, but the rot was deeper than one man. The whiskey ring had shown how corruption could hide behind law, paperwork, and loyalty, and how prison could be avoided not by innocence, but by influence. The long-term damage was quiet but lasting. Future scandals followed similar paths: expose, deny, protect, minimize. The whiskey ring became a warning story told in law schools and history books, not about whiskey, but about human weakness, greed, fear, loyalty to friends over duty to justice. and the danger of letting powerful criminals decide who deserves punishment. Today, the whiskey ring may sound distant. Old names, old crimes, old prisons, but the pattern is familiar. White-collar criminals often walk free. Powerful offenders often avoid cells. Justice still struggles to stay equal. The whiskey ring was not America's last corruption scandal. It was one of its first, and its echo still lingers. Because once a system learns how to protect itself, it rarely forgets. As the final records were sealed and the last prisoners released, one question remained unanswered. Not who stole the money, not who went to prison, but who never did, and whether America truly learned the lesson. If you think corruption ended in the 1800s, think again, because the whiskey ring did not disappear. It evolved, and the next scandal was already waiting. The last prison door closed quietly. No crowd, no cameras, no cheers. Just a man walking out into the daylight, free again. He had once helped steal millions from the United States government. He had signed papers that erased crimes. He had watched money vanish while citizens struggled. And now, his sentence was over. This was how the whiskey ring truly ended. Not with justice roaring, but with silence. By the time the final cases faded from public memory, America had already moved on. New problems filled the newspapers. New scandals replaced old ones. The whiskey ring became a story people thought they understood. They believed the criminals were caught. They believed prison had done its job. They believed the system corrected itself. That belief was comforting and wrong. Behind closed doors, many of the men connected to the whiskey ring rebuilt their lives. Some returned to business. Others found work through friends who never cut ties. They did not speak about prison. They did not apologize. They simply continued.
The government, eager to forget its embarrassment, allowed it. Records were buried, files locked away, names slowly erased from public discussion. Justice, once promised loudly, ended quietly. Inside prisons across America, inmates noticed something troubling. Men who committed violent crimes were still serving long, brutal sentences. Labor was harsh, food was poor, punishment was swift. But white-collar criminals came and went. Short stays, early releases, special treatment. The whiskey ring had exposed a truth that could not be unlearned. Prison was not equal. It never had been, and it never would be unless power itself was held accountable. Years later, historians would ask the same haunting question. What if the whiskey ring had been allowed to fully collapse? What if every name had been prosecuted? What if loyalty had not protected guilt? Some believed America missed a chance to change forever. Others argued the system was never ready to punish itself. The whiskey ring was not just a crime story, it was a mirror. It showed the nation what it did not want to see, that corruption does not need violence to survive. It only needs permission. President Grant died years later, still loved by many, still questioned by others. Benjamin Bristow faded into history, remembered as the man who tried. And the whiskey ring became a lesson taught quietly, carefully, without anger, almost like a warning whispered instead of shouted, because shouting would mean admitting how fragile justice really was. Today, when people hear about corruption scandals, shortened sentences, or powerful criminals avoiding prison, the reaction is often familiar: surprise, anger, then acceptance. That pattern began long ago, in the age of whiskey barrels and tax stamps, in a time when prison doors opened for the rich and closed forever for the poor. The whiskey ring did not end in 1875. It planted a seed. As the last echoes of the scandal disappeared into history books, one truth remained: justice is not automatic. It must be demanded, and it must be watched.
Because when people stop watching, the next ring forms, quietly, carefully, legally. And by the time it is exposed, it may already be too late. If this story disturbed you, it should, because the whiskey ring was real, and the system that allowed it still exists. History does not repeat itself by accident. It repeats itself when we stop paying attention. The warning came too late. Long after the whiskey ring faded from the front pages, a young clerk sat alone in a government office, staring at numbers that did not make sense. Taxes missing, reports altered, names signed where they should not be. He did not know the full history yet. He did not know about the whiskey barrels or the coded letters, but he felt the same cold fear Benjamin Bristow once felt, because the pattern looked familiar. And that was the most frightening legacy of all. The whiskey ring did not survive because of clever tricks alone. It survived because people stayed quiet. Some were afraid to lose their jobs. Some were loyal to friends. Some believed it was just how things worked. That silence was stronger than any lock on a prison door. When the scandal ended, the government promised reform. New rules were written, new checks were added, new speeches were made. But rules mean nothing if people choose not to enforce them, and prisons mean little if power decides who enters and who walks free. For ordinary Americans in the late 1800s, the lesson was bitter. A poor man could steal a loaf of bread and lose years of his life. A rich man could steal millions and lose his reputation for a while. The whiskey ring showed that justice was not blind. It looked up before it looked down. This realization changed how people viewed prisons forever. They were no longer just places for punishment. They became symbols of inequality. Who goes in, who stays out, and who decides. Over time, the story slipped into textbooks and lectures. The names became dates, the emotions faded, but the system remembered. Each time a white-collar criminal avoided prison, each time a scandal ended without full accountability, each time the public shrugged and moved on, the whiskey ring echoed, not loudly, but constantly. And that is why this story still matters. Not because of whiskey, not because of old politicians, but because corruption does not age. It waits, it learns, it returns in new forms, wearing new names, hiding behind new laws. The whiskey ring was one of America's first great corruption scandals. It was not the last. So when the final prison door closed and the last file was stamped resolved, the truth remained unfinished. Justice had been delayed, equality had been compromised, trust had been broken, and history left us with one final question. If the system protected itself once, what makes us believe it won't do it again? That question is the true ending of the whiskey ring, and it is one we are still answering today. Stories like this don't end, they repeat. If you want more real American crime stories they don't teach in school, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one. The next story is even darker.